Hi, I'm Marty Levinson, and you don't want me anywhere near your hair.
Hello, I'm Marty Levinson, and welcome to the Northtown News Magazine.
This is huge. I mean, bigger than China. America, you just negotiated the best deal ever, and I know deals. How do I know deals? Because I'm Marty Levinson, and this is Northtown News Magazine.
Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Come on, baby, don't you wanna go?
Hey there, I am really Marty Levinson. Don't let anybody fool you. Welcome to the Northtown News Magazine show with the greatest cameraman around, Sonny Hirsch, and your host, Avi Myers.
Thank you, Marty. Avi Myers, Northtown Neighborhood News Magazine. A presentation of Sonny Hirsch and myself. Dial us up on the web at www.ntnm.org. Over 350,000 shows watched. Thank you very much. CommunityPolicingCaps24.org. We're very pleased that the city has added 2 community policing officers to each district. It will help. I've had some of the toughest cops wound up in the community policing office sometimes. And one guy, Audie, if you remember him, as a matter of fact, he used to get over 200 arrests a year, which is like a remarkable number, and said the community policing office would produce so much more than that, it's not even funny. So there's a lot to be said for community policing along those lines. And somebody who actually covers the police and covers a number of things, and actually I think he's got great opinions on a ton of stuff and is really interesting, and thank God is not politically correct in the least, but that doesn't mean he's not. It just means like he's honest, okay? So honest is good. There aren't as many reporters as I like who are honest these days. I mean, really honest. And that is the pride of both DNA Info and Inside
Publications.
Inside Publications.
New Star, Skyline, Inside Booster.
And the police blotter writer over there, Mark Schipper. Mark, how you doing?
How you doing? That's great. That was great tiptoeing. That was a great introduction.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yes, sir.
And, it's funny you were saying what could we talk about for half an hour. I think we talked for half an hour before we even got started.
At least that. I know. Why weren't the cameras rolling?
Yeah, well, they are now, and there's plenty to talk about. So let's start. The elections weren't that long ago. And, one of the things I mentioned was the media reactions toward the election.
Yeah.
And we both talked about the media because the media, frankly, has been letting me down for years.
Yeah. It's disappointing, right?
It's very disappointing. You know what? It's like when I was watching one of my golden moments on election night, and there were no golden moments for me because I didn't like either candidate.
Yeah.
Okay, I wrote, for the record, I wrote in John Kasich. That was my guy for president. On the day, I wrote in Jewish Chicago, and I was right. I was wondering how often I changed my mind the day of election.
Yeah.
When I woke up in the morning, I thought about voting for Trump, realized I was having a really bad nightmare, woke up, that idea went completely out of my mind. Then I thought, you know what? Chris Bryant had a great year this year.
Yeah.
Can't do any worse than him.
Yeah.
And then I realized he's only 23. If we're going to do this, let's get real.
Yeah, that's unconstitutional.
So then I thought, okay, you know what? Because it's got to be a Republican after a Democrat. Adam Kinzinger, to me, is the star of the Republicans in Congress in Illinois, and very honest, for a politician, straightforward guy. I'm going to vote for Kinzinger. And then I decided, no, why don't you vote for who you really wanted to vote for, who you pushed in the primary? And that was John Kasich, and that's who I voted for. And it didn't even count, because you have to register as a write-in candidate.
Yeah, you have to register, yeah.
So,
well, you voted
which is
your conscience,
un-American,
so
but I voted my conscience.
You can sleep well at night.
And I'm proud to say that I voted for somebody who I think would have made an absolutely wonderful president. And, we'll see what happens with this one. But one of my favorite moments on election night were watching the crestfallen faces on the reporters on Channel 11 and Channel 7 realizing that their person was not going to win for the first time. They were in absolute shock.
Yeah.
It's like they probably all had to take Lomotil in order to avoid... By the way, that'll plug you up, just for those of you who don't know.
The politicalized reporter is a problem, I think. I think a bigger problem is newspapers deciding not to go to the places that they used to go to, especially the big national newspapers that are published in the big coastal and the big Midwestern cities. I don't think they go where they used to go and tell honestly what they saw there. One of the things that stuck out to me most, I think it was this last Sunday, Face the Nation, I believe, had a bunch of embedded reporters on to give their thoughts on the campaign. And these reporters came off as unbiased, and they were just telling an interesting sort of anecdote from their perspective of what happened during the campaign. And one of the people who was embedded with Trump said that the most amazing thing to them was that at every one of these Trump rallies, no matter what happened in the media or the outside world, these Trump rallies were full of joy. They never had these dark, gloomy, sinister feelings. And I'm not saying everything that went on at Trump rallies was okay, but what I'm saying is those were not the stories told by the ostensibly unbiased reporters at these places.
No, not in the least.
They should have talked to these thousands of people and asked them why they were there, how they felt at the rally, how they felt leaving the rally, and why they were for Trump. Because whether or not you agree with that or not, your job is to tell people why other people are doing things. So when they gave these stories of, the infamous Trump video from the Billy Bush Access Hollywood, the sexual assaulting of women, maybe it is, maybe it's not. I'm just putting that in quotes because that's what they called it during the debate questioning process. Is after that, you would have thought, oh, the media just laid a heavy blow on the Trump campaign. I'll bet at their next rally, people are doom and gloom, and this isn't going to happen. They showed up at the next rallies expecting Donald Trump to be president, and they went to see their guy talk. These stories weren't told by the media. To me, that's a failure of journalists who are supposed to tell stories of where they were and what happened.
A huge failure. The fact is that I talked to people about it, and I was surprised at the number of people who I thought it'd be a disqualifying factor. And they brought up something that I hadn't thought of, because even though you'd think I might know a little bit about the media, but, I can get fooled too, especially if I hear something constantly. They were saying, number one, he wasn't in office. Number two, it was a private conversation. Have you ever bull-bleeped during a private conversation with somebody?
Yeah.
It's like, it's nothing.
Yeah.
He could have just been daydreaming. And, that then if somebody would take the tack, well, what if it was real? They bring up Clinton. They bring up Kennedy. They bring up Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah.
So the fact is that, it was talk. Trump was never in office. When so many of my neighbors, would tell me how horrible Trump was, they weren't telling me anything I hadn't heard in their commercials.
Yeah.
They were parroting the commercials.
Yeah.
Not what Trump actually said or anything else, and I'm not defending Trump at all. God forbid I should ever defend Trump. But you know what? They were parroting commercials on the subject.
Another interesting thing I saw on that line is, actually, I think this was a newspaper piece I read, possibly a magazine piece. That's the problem with Twitter. You see so many news stories.
Right.
You pick one out, you read it, you remember what it said, but you don't remember where it was from or who wrote it.
I have that problem, too.
The information overload is unbelievable. But I remember this very well because it really stuck in my head, is that depending on which group of women they interviewed about Trump's comments, the reactions were completely different. So, for example, college-educated women living in cities who heard what Trump said were aghast and appalled. And if they had any thoughts of voting for him, they couldn't again, because some of their big concerns, some of their big causes are sexual assaults against women, women's equality, etc. When they interviewed people generally from the heart of the country, but could have been elsewhere, who were not college educated, who came from bluer collar backgrounds, who worked non-professional jobs, and they asked about what Trump said, they took his statement that this was locker room talk and we were bantering around, we didn't know it was being recorded, it wasn't serious. They took that at face value because the men in their lives also do those kind of things.
Yep.
And they're completely willing to forgive him because they say boys will be boys. That was the thing. So the fact that the media presented that as a single block woman's issue, as Trump said this, women are outraged, was not accurate based on how women responded to this. different women had different reactions to it.
And
that was
50
that's another failure right there. You
Big
didn't
failure.
you didn't give it honestly. Who responded in what way? They responded completely differently.
54% of white women actually voted for Trump,
Yeah.
which amazed certain people. But the media wasn't paying attention at all to what was going on.
It's very bad.
And you know what? When I started out as a reporter in the 70s, my biggest criticism about the we had 4 newspapers at the time, was that the city basically existed, but mostly downtown, and no further south than Roosevelt Road and no further north than North Avenue. Mm-hmm. And that was the main area of concentration. That's where most of the reporters lived. Mm-hmm. Very few of them lived in real neighborhoods and had contact with real people.
Yeah.
Many of them lived in high rises, had no neighbors, had no concerns about houses, apartments, and neighborhoods the way normal people did.
Yeah.
And they're literally ivory towering themselves out of reality.
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed that's a difference between a lot of the writing I read from earlier eras, and I don't want to say the good old days, but there was a different way of writing, especially for reporters back in the day. Like some of my favorite writers, reporting writers, we're going way back. Mark Twain is one, but let's use Jack London as one. Who's a little bit later than Mark Twain. Jack London was poor. He grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. He was a hobo who rode the trains for a while. He was called the Oyster King of San Francisco Bay because he actually was, or the Oyster King Pirate of San Francisco Bay, because he actually would sail around the bay and steal oysters from people who were farming them. This was like a thing that people who weren't young guys who weren't wealthy did because they could sell them. So, but the point of this is he was very close to the earth, and he spent his time as a reporter talking to the underclass. He would be in soup lines talking to those people. He would talk to the poor workers and find out what they were talking about. There was an old tradition in reporting where you had to be a part of the people to be a reporter. You could also report on presidents, but you couldn't ignore the underclasses either. You had to report on all segments of life. I found that kind of reporting these days, that even kind of outlook does not happen anymore.
It doesn't.
They report from the coasts, they report from the big cities, they report from the metropolises. They farm out these other stories to other people like they're not big stories, and they could be big stories. We could have found out what this country was really feeling about Trump and why they were feeling that way a long time ago. And if you were for a Democratic candidate, the DNC could have then reacted differently. But the sense of entitlement and the sense of we will tell you what you're supposed to feel seemed to be at an all-time high. And, I mean, we saw in the polls, we saw in the stories, it was a complete failure. Going to this election, what was Clinton's chances? Like 85, 90%? I mean, they said they were going to blow Trump out of the water. It wasn't going to be close.
And they should have.
And if they had done things the right way, you could definitely make that argument. They should have.
They didn't even come close. And the fact is, you know what? And nobody took into account, too, that people are tired, little things, like being told how much your toilet can flush.
Yes.
Or what kind of light bulb you need to have.
Yes.
Or, to bigger things like who can be in the same washroom as your daughter.
Yes.
There was a common decency throughout. I'm leaving things out here that I shouldn't be. But, not to mention the fact of forcing religions to go. Freedom of religion is one of the things this country was founded on. Not freedom from religion, but freedom of religion. You get to practice your religion. And when they're dictated to about doing something that goes against something that's clearly written in the Bible, and we're not talking some far out, thing, it's an unspeakable horror. Who has the right to be able to tell people to live their lives like that?
Yeah. I'm definitely with you on one point of that, which is being spoken down to. I think largely the vote.
By the way, that's right. That they were being condescended to.
To. They were being condescended to. Somebody wrote a piece, and I could not find it.
By the way, that's where I got it.
Yeah.
This is not original.
Yeah.
Somebody wrote about how people were being condescended. I want to say it was from the New York Times. It might have been.
The only Democratic candidate who tried to... The Democratic candidate who was most in tune with this country's feeling was Bernie Sanders by far. By far. He went to the places that Hillary Clinton pretended to go to. who she pretended that she knew what they wanted and she pretended to speak for them. He was actually speaking for them. The forgotten about working class in this country is who decided this election. And the fact that they are talking down to so much, being a college graduate used to be considered like a special thing, and you could do certain things with that college degree. But one of the things you didn't do is you didn't just dictate to people how they should feel and how they should act in their everyday lives. And these people, they're reading these newspapers, they're reading these stories about stuff that never affects their lives. They're being called racist. They're being called homophobic. They're being called xenophobic. And meanwhile, that has nothing to do with how they're living their lives.
No,
it's
not
It's
at
not
all.
an active movement. It's not a political organization.
And it's not how they really feel. Just because somebody makes an offhand comment about something here or there doesn't mean a damn thing. What matters is how you treat each person as an individual.
Exactly.
And
so I saw
by the way, I
Trump
want to
vote.
tell you something too. I think there were a certain number. I thought that it was very possible that a certain percentage of people were so embarrassed to say that they were for Trump if they were being confronted by a poll or the media.
For the polls, for sure. I agree with that. 100%.
Yeah.
I think they lied to pollsters.
Absolutely.
All over the place. I think pollsters were lied to because the level of distrust. So this actually is another media problem that we have, is that one of Trump's big talking points was that the media lies to you. And part of the way he got away with this is that the media did not report what his rallies were actually like. So Trump says the media lies to you, then a pollster shows up at your door and asks who you're voting for. And people will equate pollsters with the media. The people are going to take a poll that's going to show up in media. And so they thought, well, I am for Trump, but if I tell this pollster that, maybe that shows up in the media, maybe I'm further maligned. Maybe they find out middle America says they're going for Trump, according to this poll. So I think they said, I'm undecided. I don't know who I'm going to vote for. Maybe they even said, I'm going to vote for Hillary.
Yeah.
Maybe they just straight out lied to somebody and said, I'm going to vote for Hillary. Because I think something like that had to have happened for the polls to be as historically bad as they were. Generally, polls are really pretty reliable. But those polls rely on people telling the pollsters the truth.
Right.
If they tell the truth, they're very accurate. If they lied to pollsters, how could the poll possibly be accurate? And I think part of the reason they lied to them was because they felt like it was going to be used against them once again.
Yep.
Maybe I'm going to vote for Trump. All of a sudden, a poll says Nebraska's going for Trump. What do you got? A piece in the Times that says looks like Nebraska's going back to the pre-slavery days. They'll call them some kind of extravagant racist name, and it's like,
Give me a break.
I just answered a pollster's question. This is speculation, but I think there's some substance to it.
People really don't think that way. They just don't. I mean. It's you got a list of things I wrote about. Anything, whatever you want to talk about, we'll talk about.
Oh man, we're getting into in a big way. I would say one more. Can we do one more thing on the election?
Sure, we can do 10 more things. You want to do the whole thing about the election? We can do that too.
I don't want to do the whole thing. We can get into something more interesting than this. But I did find it interesting. I said this election was when identity politics hit back. So generally, identity politics are identified with minority groups of voting blocks, right? Like we'll get a group of people who are underrepresented. We'll show them their common interests. We'll pick candidates who they're going to vote for, and we'll hit identity politics. That is not usually used for a majority in a country. I think that the white majority voted as an identity block, which is rare in our common voting process. In a sense, I don't know when to say it's from, the 1960s, say post-civil rights era, something like that. I think that the white voting bloc banded together as an identity group and voted as white people. And I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think identity politics in general are a good thing. I think you should be voting on more common interests. But when a majority all of a sudden becomes an identity group, you see what we had in this election.
Yeah, now, but the interesting thing to me is I don't know too many white people, and I think I'm one of them, that think of themselves as white people.
Yeah.
Within white people.
In general, I agree with that. I think this election, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying identity politics hit back. I'm saying this is a rare exception when all the forces combine to put this into a group where they said we're voting for our interests. Middle America.
When I see just from TV and movies and all these shows, I mean, they are so busy trying to prove and trying to get you to like this group, that group, the other group, that it's just not, I've asked a lot of people, if you say to people, like this action, the woman action hero thing is ridiculous. Some really gorgeous 5 foot, 610-pound woman can't beat up every single man every single time and take them on no matter what. Yeah. And, people will say to me, it depends on the woman. They absolutely can't. Well, they're getting that from TV. They're getting that from movies. Yeah. You don't see a woman even in Major League Baseball, which is a nonviolent sport. Yeah. Let alone football or basketball, which is more combative. Yeah. And you know what? There's a minimalization of white males. There's also minimalization of white females sometimes. Mm. And I just don't go for it. Anyway, go yours.
No. So that was it. It was identity. I thought it was a very interesting example of identity politics, sort of running afoul. It's just.
It could be a backlash thing. Once again, people think of themselves as.
I think it is a backlash.
Yeah, people think of themselves as Irish or British or mixed or German or Dutch or Italian or whatever for the most part. Right. And half of them hate the other ones in the first place, too.
Yeah. The thing that happened here is I think the German, the Irish, the French, the Western Europeans, I think they all, the middle American, disenfranchised, not disenfranchised, but underemployed, underpaid, underrepresented, I think they all, and maybe, it's not nothing's 100%, but maybe it's not even quite as high a percentage of white voters as I'm saying, but maybe an identity group of people who are underemployed, who have poor health insurance, who have bad future prospects. All these people decided that the global elites had failed them enough and for long enough that they were going to put anybody into office who said they were going to break down that order. And Trump, whether he can do it or not, there's absolutely zero question that he said, I will be the one to break down that order. And I think they were so desperate that they said, we'll give him a chance to do it.
Yeah,
We'll give him a chance. They said, we'll take a guy in the private sector who claims he's worth billions over a woman in the public sector who is, without doubt, made herself very rich working for the government, which was never supposed to happen as far as I understand it. I don't think you should be a lifelong public servant and become an extremely wealthy, globally influential person based solely on your jobs in the government.
Yeah, and selling that influence and
peddling the influence, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think that was what the big reaction was against. I think that's why these people said we will take anybody other than that person.
I mean, to me, that's almost treason. If it's not treason.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some really serious arguments to be made about being in a position of power and having a global foundation that takes millions of dollars directly from governments across the globe, and you're in a position to run the government of your country.
And the Better Business
conflict
Bureau
of interest is it's unbelievable.
The Better Business Bureau gives them a thumbs down rating because less than 15% of the money goes directly to help somebody.
Oh,
what she actually did was her campaign staff was financed with well-paying jobs before they went back into the campaign through the Clinton Foundation. They were all on the payroll.
So it seems like we got a lot of conflicts here, right? I mean,
quite a few conflicts.
So this just goes into what I'm saying. People said, we're done with that.
Yep.
Let's get that out of here.
Okay, next subject if you're going to get to it.
Oh, we're running low on time, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, let's keep it light here. What do we got?
Okay, we got 5.5 minutes to go.
UCLA basketball?
Whatever you like.
Is that a thing to talk about?
Why not?
Well, I'll tell you what makes me nervous about UCLA basketball right now. I'm not a big fan of the head coach, Steve Alford. You know Steve Alford?
Indiana,
national championship under Bobby Knight.
Right.
Has had some success in other places. So he's UCLA missed the tournament last year. They had, I think, their third or fourth losing record in 60 years. UCLA never has a losing record. If you have a losing record at UCLA, you will live in infamy. Alford managed to do it with some great players on the roster. They don't play defense. So I just found out UCLA right now has the projected #1 recruiting class in the country for next year.
Wow.
So they got a nice team going this year. They got NBA players on the roster like they always do. You can look in the NBA right now. You might have heard of Russell Westbrook. He's a decent basketball player. Kevin Love just won a championship with the Cavaliers last year. Shabazz Muhammad, Zach LaVine, Luke Richard.
By the way, LaVine's averaging 20 points a game this year.
Yeah.
And Kevin Love's PER, for those who aren't familiar, is somewhere around 28, which means he's playing about as well as he ever did with Minnesota right now.
Okay, so Zach LaVine, this is a perfect example. Zach LaVine was a one and done at UCLA. He played his freshman year, went to the NBA. He played behind Bryce Alford. You might remember what I said.
Yeah, the
coach's name was
son
Steve
of,
Alford.
yes.
Played behind Steve Alford. Actually, he went in platoon with Steve Alford's son his freshman year at UCLA. You had a guy who went straight to the NBA, platooning with a guy who's going to play 4 years, Alford's son, and he might play overseas a little bit. He's not going to be an NBA basketball
No
player.
way.
So this is what we're dealing with. So they don't play defense, but what I'm worried about is UCLA's athletic department is the most coddled athletic department in the world. Professional athletes seem to wander onto that campus. Football and basketball. Let's not get into football. That's an even worse story. But so next year we got the #1 recruiting class in the country coming in, and I don't think he's going to do anything with it. I don't think he doesn't coach up defense. They got teams that score a whole bunch of points, but if your shooting goes cold and you got freshmen and sophomore on the team who aren't,
You win basketball games with defense.
by getting stops,
Yeah.
you stop the other team from scoring. With great athletes, you'll find a way to score points.
Right.
But if you can shut down the other team, you're going to win games.
Absolutely.
So UCLA basketball remains a sleeping giant. You know what I mean? I watch Duke win titles. I watch North Carolina win titles. I watch Indiana's resurgence. I watch Kentucky making runs every single year. Meanwhile, UCLA gets every bit as good, if not better, basketball players onto their campus. UCLA hasn't won a national championship since 1995. They've been to 3 Final Fours in recent vintage, but no championships.
By the way, you would have enjoyed the Wooden era and then some.
Okay.
That was
Yeah, that was the greatest.
the
Unprecedented, untouched, never will be touched.
Lou Alcindor, now known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. In those days, you could not play varsity as a freshman.
Yeah. Yep.
And they had a fantastic varsity squad that made it far into the NCAA tournament.
Won the championship.
Yeah, and the freshman team beat them.
Beat them because of Lou Alcindor at that time. Yeah,
Among others.
Among others. That's absolutely true. And when Lou Alcindor got the promotion sophomore year, they finally let him play a little varsity ball. He went on to win 3 consecutive national titles. It would have been, they already had the 4th as it was, but he could have won 4.
He could have easily won 4, and he in some ways I in my mind he's one of the 2 greatest players I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And no, the other one is not Michael Jordan. The other one would be Wilt Chamberlain.
Wilt
And
still, yeah, he was the man.
The fact is,
What about
that
Oscar Robertson though?
Oscar Robertson was probably, once again, better than Michael Jordan. He was the greatest non-guard I ever saw. It may not be a popular thing to say here, but there is nothing that Oscar Robertson couldn't do.
He was amazing.
And the fact is, if he was squared away from 12 feet, he would take it in at least 10 feet. I don't think he ever missed a free throw in his life in the last 5 minutes of a game either.
Yeah.
He was a remarkable player, and he averaged a triple-double in an entire year one year.
Yeah, he's basketball immortality.
My very first NBA game, I saw him and Jerry Lucas against the old Chicago
did you really?
Packers. Yeah,
Wow.
that was really cool.
What a
I
treat,
mean, Cincinnati. It was the Cincinnati Royals at the time. They beat the Chicago Packers, or maybe it was the Chicago Zephyrs that year. I forget. 153 to 125. And by the way, Wade Embry was the starting center for Cincinnati.
Oh yeah.
The present NBA general manager.
Were they playing in Chicago Stadium in those days?
Amphitheater.
Oh, in the amphitheater. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're about out of time. So I want to thank you very much, Mark Schipper, of both DNA Info and Inside Publications. And he's really got some great stuff, and you ought to check it out. And I'm waiting for him to break through and be a star in his own right one of these days, because he is an honest, straightforward, has some very unique thoughts on things, and want to wish you all the luck in the world in your journalism career. I want to thank you, Sonny Hirsch, my entire technical crew. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Bye-bye.